Good evening. The story tonight is called The Contest, from the 24 Carat Buddha and Other Fables by Maxine Harris. The publisher is the Sidran Institute Press from Baltimore, Maryland. Many years ago, when the king was still a young man, his palace was visited by a group of traveling minstrels. Among the troop was a wise man who delighted in talking philosophy and debating the meaning of life. The king spent many hours with the old man, discussing everything from how to rule his kingdom wisely to strategies for mediating disputes among his many advisors. The king listened eagerly to all the man had to say, and when it was time for him and his fellows to leave the palace, the king thanked him for all he had learned. "You have been a good student," said the philosopher, "and what you have learned will help you to rule well here on earth. But if you want to enter the kingdom of heaven when you die, you will need more than philosophical discussions. You will need to answer the one question that has plagued men since the beginning of time. What is it that makes for a happy life?" The king listened to the old man, but he was not sure why that question was any more important than how to win wars or amass riches. The old man saw the puzzlement on the king's face and only smiled. "Perhaps this question does not seem so important now. You have many things to accomplish and a long life ahead of you. But someday, when the years show on your face as they do on mine, you will remember this question." And with those parting words, the old philosopher joined his troop of travelers and went on his way. Many years passed, and the king governed well and wisely. Many times he remembered his discussions with the old man and used his guidance to make the right decision. But the king forgot completely about the question the old man posed as he was leaving the palace, until one day. The king found that as he grew older and approached the end of his life, he no longer cared as much about how to win wars and settle disputes. Instead, he found that as he sat in the palace garden and watched the sunset, only one question ran through his mind: what makes for a happy life? And once he began to ask himself that question, posed so many years before by the traveling philosopher, the king found that he could think of nothing else. He thought about this question at night before he fell asleep, and in the morning as he woke to the first rays of the sun. It was the first question he asked of every visitor, and the last question in his prayers at night. Now, many in the kingdom wondered why the king was so concerned with what makes for a happy life, since to most of the inhabitants the king's own life seemed the very model of happiness. He had ruled in peace and abundance for many years. He had wed a beautiful princess who not only brought lands as part of her dowry, but who loved him dearly. His sons and daughters were all strong and healthy, and he himself enjoyed every manner of privilege. What more could the king hope to learn of happiness than the life he had lived for the past many years? Yet the king remained obsessed with his question. He spent hours trying to remember his conversations with the old philosopher to see if perhaps the old man had given him some clue that might answer the question. But the more he thought about what makes for a happy life, the more confused he became, and the more despairing that he would ever find an answer. Seeing how fretful the sovereign had become, one of his advisors offered the following suggestion: "Your Highness, why don't you proclaim a contest across all the land to help you find an answer to your question? A great reward could be promised to the man or woman who successfully answers your question about a happy life. "What a wonderful idea!" exclaimed the king. "Then I will have all the smartest and most wonderful subjects in my kingdom and beyond coming to me with their wisdom about happiness. Surely, with a competition like that, I am certain to discover the one true answer to what makes for a happy life." The king smiled as he considered all the contestants who would bring him answers to choose from, and for the first time in months, he felt himself beginning to relax. As word spread across the land about the king's challenge, people everywhere began to think about their lives and about what brought them happiness. Many were convinced that they knew the key to a happy life and began planning what they would do with the vast reward the king had promised. Others worked to prepare their presentation to the king, describing in exquisite detail the sources of their own happiness. On the first day of the new year, all who wished to compete in the king's challenge were invited to come to the palace. The king gathered his most trusted advisors and prepared to listen to the answers brought by his many subjects. After several minutes of prayers and gracious welcoming speeches, the chief advisor to the king began. "Who among you is ready to speak first? The king is eager to hear your answers so that he might finally know the secret to a happy life." With that invitation, one very tall and elegant-looking woman stepped forward. "I am the mother of 12 children," she began. "I cared for them when they were small and taught them well. Their accomplishments have brought me much joy, and now my children and grandchildren care for me in my older age. The secret to a happy life is to have a large family with many sons and daughters." As the audience listened to her answer, some nodded in agreement, but others were quick to disagree. "I, too, have many children," said a man with thick glasses, "but they have not been the source of my happiness. Throughout my life, I have found the greatest pleasure in my books. Every night, I end the day by going into my library and reading from one of my treasured books. I have learned so many things and have always felt content with a book in my hands." "Nonsense," called a large man dressed in long velvet robes and sporting a brightly colored ring on every finger of his hands. "Books don't bring you happiness. The secret to a happy life is great wealth. Just look at me. I have enough money to buy anything in the world. Throughout my life, I have enjoyed the very best meals, have drunk the finest wines, and have traveled to the most exotic places. My wealth has allowed me to enjoy every possible pleasure." "Material things cannot bring happiness everlasting," shouted a young man surrounded by a group of friends. "Friendship is the source of true happiness. My comrades and I have been together since childhood. We share each other's sorrows and triumphs and always offer a helping hand. In the evenings, my home is filled with the laughter and conversation of several friends and their families. I am never alone, and I know that my friends will always be there to support me. Who could be happier than a man with such fine comrades as these?" Just as another woman was about to speak, the king rose to his feet. "How will I ever decide the true key to a happy life?" he lamented, holding his head in his hands as he spoke. "Your answers are all so different. One of you proclaims that a large family is the key to happiness. Another declares that books and knowledge hold the secret, and still others boast that wealth or friendship are at the heart of happiness. The answers are as different from each other as night is from day. Yet you each seem happy and content. How can it be possible that there seem to be as many different answers as there are people in this room? And just as he uttered those words, the king knew the answer to his question. He then ordered that the royal treasurer divide the reward equally among all of his subjects. The additional reading. The contest. There is no such thing as universal happiness. What makes one individual glow with contentment may seem tedious and boring to another. Yet, despite the fact that we may know full well that each individual must seek his or her own happiness, we still look to others to give us the formula for a happy life. We read advice columns and buy self-improvement books in search of some one-size-fits-all prescription for happiness. Each speaker in the story has his or her own path to happiness. Each speaker in the story has their own prescription for happiness. And when the king realizes that the paths are as different as the people in his kingdom, he understands an essential truth. Each of us must find our own formula for contentment. And although we may borrow from others, we must ultimately choose that which fits our own unique self. Thank you for listening.